Hello. A morning contemplation for you. I call it the coming or the dawn of the binaries. And it's connected to this transmission of the 55th gene key. Sometimes when I reread that 55th gene key, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that I wrote such prophetic, wild things, or that they wrote themselves. And one of the things mentioned in there is about the sacred marriage. The sacred marriage is the soul, two souls connecting together so deeply that they create the field of an enlightened consciousness by the two coming together. And part of the 55th gene key predicts or prophesies that phenomenon will occur more in the future as the 55th gene key unlocks these higher frequencies in humanity. And that's one of the ways in which that awakening will be unlocked. And I've been thinking about this morning. And it's quite something. I feel it deeply true. The 55th gene key is really about romance. It's true romance in the true meaning of the word. What we see as romance in our films, in our movies, in our books. That's the beginning of understanding what romance really is. But romance is it's life. It's the drama of the maya, of the illusion, of the playing out of karma. And part of the nature of this world is it's a romantic dream. All of it, it's just a romantic dream. And towards the end of the dream, fulfillments begin to occur more rapidly. It's just like any good romance. There's a tension and a build-up, and then there's a shock, and then slowly there's a reunification until there's a final ending of unity. If it's a true romance, there must be that unity at the end. There must be that redemption, that atonement. And so, as our DNA starts to mutate, and as the higher consciousness starts of the 55th gene key, that freedom starts to come into humanity, we're going to see more and more of these divine couples. Now, I want to be careful when I say that, because it doesn't mean what you may think it means. These are binaries. These are binary relationships. It's where the consciousness of a human being of a soul or a causal body has literally divided into two, and then come into two separate bodies for the purpose of finding each other and then awakening. It's kind of one of the ways in which the awakening of the future is going to occur more and more. And as the world also starts to fall more silent and the population naturally decreases, one of the things we'll see is these binaries coming together, finding each other, and then going off into quiet places in nature, I imagine. And then living together. And living together with an extended lifespan also, which is part of what will happen in the future. That's fairly obvious to most of us. But the binaries are so self-enclosed that they have to go through this process of absorption, where they're just absorbed in each other's company. Like when you fall in love, you become utterly absorbed in that person's aura. You become swallowed up by that love that unites you. And over time in life, and as it comes, that begins to fade for most people. But in the binaries, that won't fade. It will just go on coalescing and being, we'll go on purifying them, purifying the karma, that love, the depth of that love, purifying the karma that lies in their ancestral lines to such a degree that they will become one, one enlightened consciousness. in two bodies. And then their role is either complete or it begins, because they then become the linchpin of an awakening community, potentially, because they become a true mother-father. And they may be two men or two women, and even they may be one human and one animal, one creature, because that's also written into the future, the future awakening, is that, we have these links and bridges to the animal and bird kingdom. And so we can form these binaries with creatures as well. That's a specific kind of destiny, but it's where you share the same consciousness as the creature, whether it's a dog or whether it's a bird, or, it can be any creature, but you share the same consciousness, and that grows, and you learn from each other. It's a very specific karma. Beautiful, but there's still a binary, and you're locked into that binary. And when one dies in the form, then the other one, it kind of dies with you. It's like in the romance, you die together, right? Or you ascend, so you absorb each other into the oversoul, and then the bodies are just dropped. That's the romantic one. That's the purest form. So we're going to see all kinds of binaries, deep loves coming into the world in the future. It's a very different world. It's a dream. When we look at the world we have around us today, I'm talking a few hundred years ahead. It's not long. And these will begin to drop into the human genome. These mutations, they're going to begin to drop into among us. And then they'll spread, and there'll be more and more of them. And so the love will begin to burgeon. And these links and bridges will take place between the realms, between the male, between the female, between the human, between the animal. Between all these realms, these dream realms. Because every creature and every object and everything has a correspondence with our genome, through the cities. So when you unlock a city, let's take the 37th city, tenderness. When you unlock that city has a resonance to every dog, in our realms. Just as the 40th city has a resonance to every cat. So somewhere in your genome, if that city unlocks, there's the potential to reach across the divide and connect with one of those creatures, or with all those creatures in some way. And this is what's called the dream arc teachings, very profound teachings that connect humanity in a much deeper way to the creatures and nature surrounding us. So these binaries are coming, they're coming. And it's a new kind of romance that we can expect to dawn in our world. All these romantic dreams occurring, like the finale of many people's incarnative cycles, will end with one of these binaries. So just as our romance, as our romantic films and things, they end in that sweet, tender way. The same for us, through our incarnative cycles. If it's in our destiny, in our dharma, then that will be the way in which we awaken. And the story goes on from there, but just wanted to share that about the binary so you can consider it for yourself. It's coming. It's coming. A very, very different world is coming. We cannot imagine it. We can, but you have to have a big imagination.